Good evening, everybody. This is Omar Serrano with the Tilted Lawyer podcast. And we have, I know there's a lot going on in the topics that I normally cover, but it's an important time in America. And it's an important time really in this nation's history. And really, we're at a crossroads. This is the first time in my lifetime, and that I could recall in American history, where the executive branch, where the president of the United States is openly and brazenly defying Supreme Court orders, challenging the orders that were made and reframing them as a 9-0 victory on behalf of the Trump administration, framing it as if they were trying to make orders that stated that because the judicial branch has no right to make foreign policy decisions, that they were well within their purview to not bring back the people that have been removed without due process. It's the first time that I could ever remember that ICE or members of the government have rounded up, other than the concentration camps back in like the 40s and 50s, where groups of people were rounded up on mere suspicions, shipped on a plane, and shipped off to a torture camp in El Salvador. We have this young man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, is 29 years old. He came into the country when he was 14 years old. 14. Of course, he was here illegally, had no legal basis to be here, but he was brought here as a child, as so many children have been historically, and by the way, continue to be under Trump's administration. He has no criminal record to speak of. He enters the country without authorization as a teenager. He's later obtained and picked up by ICE. I think he was trying to get a job looking for contractor work at a Home Depot. He's picked up in 2019. He claims asylum. Now, the problem with asylum is that there's a 1-year period where you have, once you enter the country, to file an asylum claim if you're fleeing your country. And by the way, the El Salvadorian president yesterday admitted that El Salvador just happens to be the murder capital of the world, is currently under an authoritarian regime, is currently torturing prisoners in their El Salvadorian prison. And this is where we send our people to. Now, obviously, Trump is going to argue they're not our people. They were here illegally. They had no right to be here. That's what they say. An immigration judge acknowledging that there is a 1-year bar to file an asylum claim, and therefore his asylum claim was dead on arrival, says, look, he came in as a young man. He doesn't have a criminal record. He doesn't have a rap sheet. He is not an MS-13 gang member. There were allegations or suggestions that because when he was picked up, he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hoodie or hat or something, that he might be linked. There was an anonymous tip that suggested that he was seen commiserating with MS-13 gang members in New York, a state that he had never been. There was never a finding that he was a gang member. And so the judge in that case in 2019 issues a withholding order, say, look, we're not going to remove you because you claim that you're fearful of returning to your country. And by the way, a kid that comes here at 15 years old and has nothing to go home to, who fled from gangs in one of the most dangerous countries in the world, and I've worked on some of these cases, the conditions over there are horrific. They will kill you. Just flat out kill you for any reason. And so the judge says, you know what? Withholding order. The government is not allowed to remove him. He's not allowed to be deported. He was not issued a deportation order. They say, you know what? Just stay out of trouble. You'll be fine. He has a work permit. He's allowed to work legally in the U.S. He's now in the country legally. He meets a young lady, happens to be a U.S. citizen. They get married. They have a child. That child is, I believe, non-verbally autistic. He's involved in that child's care. He's kept his nose out of trouble, and he's picked up and unceremoniously shipped off and lied about by this Trump administration. They come in, they label him a gang member. They label him in stating that he's been twice deported, that he's been here illegally. He's labeled and branded a criminal. He's a rapist. He's a child molester. He's whatever you want to call him. They just make it up. They just made it up. They make it up. They make it up. And we're gonna talk about some of that. Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller is seemingly the mouthpiece of the Trump administration. He's the mouthpiece. And since they so brazenly are willing to label young men like this with no criminal history, no criminal background, no reason to call him as such, just label him a gang member and a criminal worthy of a criminal torture concentration camp in El Salvador. I'm just going to call Stephen Miller for what he is. He's a fucking Nazi. He's a white nationalist. He is a fucking Nazi. And he speaks for America. And because Trump allows him to speak for him, he speaks for Trump. And you know what? There's been a lot of talk about who Trump is and what he isn't. And I spent the better part of the last 2 years trying to make friends and understand the way that people that support Trump, the way that they support him, the way that they think, what are their concerns, what are they worried about, what is their ideology. And all I kept hearing for the last 2 years really is, oh, it's all about law and order. It's all about non-censorship, freedom of speech, protecting our American ideals and all. But guess what? There's no fucking law and order in this country when you could just be disappeared, when you're legally here and just labeled a criminal, labeled a gang member, and shipped off to a country where you have no real ties to anymore without any kind of due process. And then when the Supreme Court says in a 9-0 decision that you must bring him back, you must facilitate his return. And by the way, facilitate does not mean we will provide the plane. No, facilitate means you will take action to ensure his safe arrival back into the United States. But Trump says, hey, what's done is done. I can't tell El Salvador what to do. And then we bring the El Salvadorian president to the White House, and he says, I can't tell the United States what to do. I can't smuggle in a terrorist. And so they're just, and just fucking leave him there. They leave him there. That's what we're dealing with right now. That's the law and order that we're talking about. So why don't we just call it what it actually was this entire time? There were hints going all the way back to 2017 when he refused to speak bad about anybody that was professed a white nationalist at that one, I forget what it was. There was a riot back in Charlottesville or something like that. He refused to denounce the Proud Boys when he was debating Joe Biden back in 2020. He gets up on here and everybody says, oh, I don't know anything about Project 2025. I don't know anything about white nationalists. I'm for everybody and for this and that. It turns out that the America that he wants to return us to was from 1898. 1898 was a very different place than 2025 or 2024, I should say. And for a guy like me who doesn't identify as Democrat or Republican, I'm probably more conservative in my political views than otherwise, but I view myself as an independent. And I'm no longer going to ignore what's in plain sight. What's in plain sight is that Donald Trump has put a group of white nationalists around him, a group of yes men and yes women, and has openly ordered everybody in his cabinet to defy every roadblock that's ever been built over the last 300 years from our United States Constitution to stop somebody from acting like they were a third world dictator king. King Trump. It's not President Trump. He wants to be King Trump. Supreme Court ruled against you 9-0. Bullshit. It looks like they ruled for us 9-0. They just admitted they have no right to tell us what to do about foreign policy. So they can fuck off. That's where we're going. Now look, they're gearing up for contempt charges and all this. I don't think that that's going anywhere, honestly. Yeah, they're going to bring them up for contempt. What's that going to do? We have built something for the last 300 years. We have built a nation that was supposed to be built on freedom of speech, on all of the main tenements of our Constitution. And it has protected us and done us well, and it gave us a certain standing in the world. And in the course of less than 100 days, he has done everything in his power to tear it down. I'm not even talking about tariffs. I'm not talking about his immigration policies in terms of who should or shouldn't be given an opportunity to be here legally or not. I'm talking about he is going into the cities and going into college campuses. And if you happen to speak out against something that he doesn't like, he shuts you down. And if you happen to be here legally, but just not a U.S. citizen, you might be shipped on a plane to El Salvador. Just this morning, there was a 40-year-old immigration attorney who she practices immigration. So she thought that she was just getting something for her clients. Turns out she was told she should remove herself from the country within the next 7 days. She says, I mean, I'm here illegally. I have all my whatever, this and that. Obviously, I'm not going to, I got to assume that it was a mistake, but is it a mistake? Is ICE going to be showing up at her house or more, at her law office and removing her in cuffs and shipping her off to whatever country they feel like? It turns out they gave this guy, El Salvadorian president, $6 million to keep the people that they just shipped over in that El Salvadorian prison. And you know what? Donald Trump was caught on camera in a small conversation where he's basically told the El Salvadorian president, you know what, you should build another 5 of these, president, because we're getting ready to, and I'm paraphrasing, we're getting ready to send you our homegrown criminals, U.S. citizens. He's ramping up to deport U.S. citizens. I'm going to have Brad on my show. He's coming on. He's got something prepared. He wants to debate this with me. He wants to talk about it or whatever. I've listened to Brad, and I've invited him on the show because he's got something to say, but I got something to say. I'm done listening to these fucking people. Not Brad. Brad's welcome to talk. I will talk to Brad. But anything that comes out of Trump's mouth, anything that comes out of this administration, really for the last 12 years, has been lies. His followers, for the most part, follow a false prophet. They have no idea who this fucking guy really is. I've heard, he's this Christian guy, he's this whatever. For whatever reason, the Christian religion, not all of them, these Christian nationalists have adopted Donald Trump as their Lord and Savior. And they follow him blindly. They spout off this propaganda. The White House secretary is literally deliberately praying out in the open, videotaped and broadcast for the world to see before she goes out and answers and lies to the world about her bullshit. Art of the deal, you just don't understand tariffs. You don't understand this. You don't understand what a negotiator. It's all been a fucking lie. All of it. All of it. And when I say, is America losing its soul? I think back to the men and women that have died, that have lost their lives. Look, we evolved. When we were born in 1776, we were a certain thing. We had this dream that we could become independent, our own thing. And we had a constitution. We put it in place to build upon these principles that we might stand on our own 2 feet on a global stage and be recognized as a country. And it wasn't perfect, and we went through a lot of bumps and bruises and wars, a fucking civil war, War of 1812. There was a lot going on. Slavery was abolished. But then we had to deal with the evolution of how do we get past this idea that some American people, some that were born here, were less than a whole person. Slaves were like 2/3 of a vote or something like that for the longest time. That evolves into the introduction of the KKK because we must preserve these principles. We cannot allow anybody else that's not lily whites, born and bred in the United States, to come up and be seen as equals. So then you got the Jim Crow laws. and you have the civil rights movements of the 1960s, and it goes on, and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all of these people that fought and died with this hope that American principles could reflect what they said, that all men and women are created equal, that everybody would be given an opportunity to succeed, the pursuit of freedom, the pursuit of happiness, all of those things, right? All everybody asked for was a shot. And they fought and they died, and we got to a certain place and we were making progress. And then Donald Trump gets in there. He surrounds himself with white nationalists. And if you didn't think so before, make no mistake about it, he's coming after you folks. He may, if he could disappear people that are here legally for no reason, just label him a gang member. He's got a tattoo of that says mom and dad. He must be a gang member. Ship him out. You happen to support Hamas? Gone. You happen to have an educational take that's counter to mine? Gone. DEI hires? Gone. Everything this country has been building up for the last 300 years is being diminished in a way that is, you could say that it was that you could see this coming, but not in a million years, would have predicted that it would happen this fast and like this. At least in 2016, he tried to pretend. In 2025, he sees himself as King Trump. Whatever you thought that he was, whatever you thought that he was going to do as the Republican leader that was taking lead of this country as the president and chief, well, it wasn't that. And unless you are yourself a white nationalist, I can't imagine that you would be pleased with what you've seen so far. This thought that he would go after people here legally, make stuff up, put you on a plane, and then gone. Gone. I want to play you guys. This is what happened in the White House yesterday. This is what we've become. This is what it is. Let me share my screen. Brett, I'm going to bring you in here in a minute, but I want to get this out just to set the tone. This was President. Oh, I got to make sure I get the right clip. It was this one. All right, let us take a listen. This is what happened yesterday at the White House. In case you missed it.
Question from this very low-rated anchor at CB.
Actually, didn't want to show that one first. There was a follow-up to something that he had just said. Oh, actually, that was the one. Let's continue with that. So this is CNN anchor. He calls her, very low-rated reporter. That's why nobody watches him anymore. His typical bars, whatever. You've grown used to that. But this is how he addresses the question.
To ask President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported. The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador.
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it.
No. They told them to facilitate it. There's never been a time in American history where there was somebody that was one of ours that we wanted to get back, that we didn't go back, that we didn't go into that country and make it happen. Trump is literally just saying, what are you going to do?
Meaning provide a plane.
So will you return him?
And you are doing a great job. Thank you.
Pam Bondi, the perennial yes woman, cannot speak for herself. I don't even believe that she believes what she's saying when she says that. Look at her grabbing her throat. Just the way that came out of her voice. She doesn't believe what she's saying. She was told to say that.
Wait a minute. Could you just also respond to that question? Because, it's asked by CNN and they always ask it with a slant because they're totally slanted because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But Would you answer that question also, please?
Yes.
This is the mouthpiece of the White House right now. Stephen Miller, white nationalist, Nazi. This is who he is. This is what we've become.
Gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador.
He's no longer illegal. He was here legally under a program that America had drafted where we promised that he would be safe because of the dangers that he'd experienced as long as he kept his nose out of trouble. And he did keep his nose out of trouble. What's more, he was married to an American citizen. So he had a path to U.S. citizenship before any of this happened. I'm going to keep correcting him the more bullshit comes out of his mouth.
So it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens.
We would absolutely tell El Salvador how to handle our people that were sent there erroneously if this was any other president.
Starting point. As 2 immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13.
No immigration court found that he was a member of MS-13. He was alleged to be a member of MS-13 because he was picked up wearing a Chicago Bulls hoodie and a hat. There was an anonymous tip from somebody nobody even knew that claimed that they saw him commiserating with MS-13 gang members up in New York, which was never true. He's never been there in his life. But they're just saying it like it's true. They're just pretending that it's true. It's absolutely mind-boggling. It's astounding. They're just literally making this shit up. If you look in the court records, you're not going to find any of this shit in there. They're literally just putting it out there, and people that follow Trump blindly and don't want to think for themselves and don't want to actually open their eyes to what's going on in this country are going to believe dipshits like this guy.
President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization. That meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very
If he was found to be a member of MS-13 and actually a terrorist, that's true. That finding was never made. Now he's just tossing out word salad.
familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order.
Never a deportation order. There was literally a withholding order, meaning there was not a deportation order.
That was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States.
Again, wrong. Withholding order means you're literally allowed to be here. It means you're literally not allowed to be deported and removed from this country because of protections that are afforded. You have to qualify to receive that kind of thing. And one of the requirements is that you are here, you've availed yourself to the country, we know where you're at, you keep an address on file with immigration, with ICE, we know where to find you, you don't commit crimes, and you have to prove that you have a viable path to citizenship, which he had. He was literally married to a U.S. citizen.
And had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge.
From the 1800s, by the way.
Completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That's
not at all what happened. It said, you guys fucked this up. You guys shipped him over there without any due process. You guys admitted in your pleadings that he was not here illegally, that he hadn't violated anything, that he wasn't a gang member, that there's no basis to deport him, and then threw your hands up and said, we can't do anything about it. They never said, go kidnap anybody from El Salvador. They said, go get him back, is what they said.
That issue was raised with the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously.
It was not unlawful. They had a question over some of the language that was used, and they wanted further clarifications from the lower court. But the pertinent part of that order was, under no mistaken terms, facilitate the return of this young man and do it forthwith.
Stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the president could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member.
That's not what the order said. What they basically said was, look, you bring him back. You give that young man due process. You do whatever you would have done had he not been sent to El Salvador. But he's going to be afforded due process because that's what the Constitution is. That's what it says. That's what men and women have fought and died for, to have those protections. Those protections are asserted not just to U.S. citizens, but to people whom this country has made promises to. We made a promise to this young man that we wouldn't send him back to El Salvador unless he did certain things. He didn't do any of these things. We're breaking promises to him. He was afforded constitutional rights because we promised it to him. All he's asking for is some due process and prove the basis for which you're saying he needs to be removed. You're saying he was a gang member. Prove it. You said he was found to be a gang member by 2 courts. No, he wasn't. Show me anywhere where that happened. You say that he was an active terrorist. Show me these things. That's what due process is for. And when we find out you made a mistake, he will be returned to his home and left alone. He'll have to prove that he had a viable path towards citizenship. He would prove that because he has a United States wife. They could apply for it. They could have applied for it. I don't know why they didn't. I mean, I don't know what that situation is about. I'm only saying is he is eligible right now to receive green card protections and become a U.S. citizen. But he's in a torture camp right now.
Of MS-13, which is, I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world. And I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
Yeah, that's literally how they view this guy. A young man, 29 years old, doing his best to make it in the world. They just literally framed him as a child molester, rapist, murderer. He's just been defamed on a world stage.
So you don't plan
But
to
the
ask for
Supreme
anything
Court's
to get
asking
him back?
to,
And
Is that-
what was the ruling
is that-
in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0.
And listen to how they frame this 9-0 decision. It is the most smarmy, slimy thing. I don't want to say that I've ever seen from this guy, but it was literally a 9-0 decision. Says, yeah, you got to go get this young man back. And what they took away from that, it's not that they know that they're full of shit. They know that. But this is how they're spinning it on the world stage. Dog signaling and whistling to all of the MAGA people that are cool with this kind of thing. And it's not the vast majority of them. I think the vast majority of people that voted for Trump did not expect this to happen. I think the vast majority of people that voted for Trump said, oh, even if he tries that, it's never going to go that way because this is fucking America. So right now, I'm not standing up for Democrats. I'm not standing up for liberals. I'm not standing up for independents. I'm not standing up for Republicans. I'm standing up for the soul of America because this ain't it. And whatever president chose to get into office and put these fucking people in office, these spineless yes men and women, these white nationalist fucking Nazis, to act as a mouthpiece for America, kicking us out of our position on the world stage, kicking us off of our mantle because they have some kind of white nationalistic ideology that they want to pursue. And now is their big chance because nobody's stopping them. I'm standing up for the soul of America and nothing more. This is not a political argument for me. This is me. I've been a citizen in this country for all my life. I've been raised with certain American ideals and I believe in them. And this is not it. To me, this is worthy of impeachment and he should be arrested. He should already be in jail. He's guilty of how many felonies? 92? If any of you were convicted of 90 plus felonies, my guess is you would probably spend 20 to 25 years in prison. Unless you had the resources of Donald Trump.
So,
In our favor,
against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual at El Salvador's sole discretion was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because
If they had a basis to deport him, yeah. But it turns out, if you look into this guy's case, he was not deportable. He's done nothing wrong. And he's got a path to citizenship. If this never happened, he literally probably would have been a citizen within a couple of 2-3 years or so, had he applied for the appropriate provisions.
he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it per the court can only be directed to him.
I asked
¿Usted lo
President
liberaría,
Bukele, what is
Presidente
can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you?
Yeah, and what he says is more what I would expect from somebody that's the president of El Salvador that runs a prison torture chamber to say. I would expect that from him, but we're getting that from Trump. And what's more is they probably coalesced earlier before going into there to say exactly what they're saying right now.
Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm suppose you're not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's always
How
CNN.
can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
But you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. We just.
The question was, well, then why keep him there in that prison? I ain't going to release a terrorist in my country. So he's basically stuck there. This young man is stuck there in this El Salvadorian prison. This president of El Salvador doesn't want him there. Donald Trump doesn't want him in America. So he is bound. He's, for right now, there indefinitely. There for life. There for life. For what?
Just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere.
He just said we used to be the murder capital of the world, and now we are the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. Is what he just said.
Want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into our
I mean,
country.
there's a fascination.
Everything that Donald Trump is saying right now, him co-signing on what Stephen Miller just said, this position that he's taking, it's not that he's dumb. It's not that he doesn't know what he's doing. It's that he himself, I have to believe, I have to call it like it is. Adolf Hitler was a thing way back when. Adolf Hitler's biggest mistake was he was too loud and obvious about what he was doing. Donald Trump doesn't have very dissimilar ideals from Adolf Hitler. He's literally rounding up people that are here legally for no reason, without due process, the same way that the Gestapo ran through the cities in Germany and rounded people up and threw them into concentration camps. The only difference is that he's going about it a little bit more smartly, although not altogether that smart, because honestly, if he had a basis, he could have just deported the guy and given him due process and deported him and wouldn't even been having this discussion. But yet here we are, because he's a little too brazen now. And that's what it is. That's who Donald Trump is showing himself to be. And I'm no longer listening to arguments that are counter to that. This is who he is. He's been showing us that this is who he is since 2016. Little dog whistles here and there, just little chirps, not denouncing the Proud Boys, leading an insurrection on January 6th, not denouncing white nationalists here and there, having Stephen Miller be the mouthpiece for the White House, deporting people without due process, and then openly in the White House, when cameras were running, openly stating that he's prepping to go after homegrown folks, meaning U.S. citizens. This is who Donald Trump is.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people. Mark, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I mean, Stephen outlined it. I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin.
Isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals?
We won a case 9-0.
Oops. I didn't want to listen to this spineless pig, Marco Rubio. I was trying to skip over him.
By the president of the foreign policy.
Marco's point. The Supreme Court said exactly what Marco said, that no court has the authority to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. We won a case 9-0, and people like CNN are portraying it as a loss, as usual, because they want foreign terror.
Because the entire world perceived it as a loss, because that's what the fuck it was. A loss. Go and get that young man. And they're saying, oh, you can't tell us what to do about foreign policy. Well, that's just the law. They mentioned that as a byproduct of the order that they issued. The meat of that order was go and get that young man. They're spinning it as a 9-0 victory. They're reporting to their base that this was a 9-0 victory. This is how delusional these people are. They're not delusional. This is the scam that they're running on America. This is the scam that they're running on the world. This is the scam that they're running on the MAGA base. And some people that can think for themselves and do their own research and actually look into what they're saying, who haven't been fooled by these fucking people for the last 12 years, are not falling for it. This is what it is.
Terrorists in the country who kidnap women and children. But President Trump, his policy is foreign terrorists that are here illegally get expelled from the country, which, by the way, is a 90-10 issue.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago. And they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore.
And that's the classic Trump deflection. And with that, and on those grounds, I'm going to bring in Brad, who's been waiting patiently in the green room. And, well, Brad, what do you have to say for yourself? I know.
You're going to bust my balls on this one, huh?
Well, I told you, no holds barred, man. I almost didn't want to bring you on just because I was feeling this way. But I do admire the balls that you have to come in. And, you know, I honestly don't know what you believe. We spoke for, I don't know, over text message for like 10 minutes today, just kind of going back and forth about stuff. I have no idea what your opinions are on this.
I mean, we didn't have any substantive discussion about this matter.
On purpose. Yeah.
But I even messaged you in private chat. I was like, you sure you want me on? You're on a roll. And I don't know if there's anything that I'm really going to provide that's either going to sway your opinion or...
You did say, well, you're definitely not going to sway my opinion, but I will listen to what you have to say. I'm just not going to take any of your shit. How about that?
I mean, you know.
I mean, not that you have, look, I feel that based on our text messages, I feel like you're probably a little bit misinformed. I don't think I'm going to convince you of that. I have no designs on trying to convince you of that. I think that my fascination in having you on is more just, I'm really trying to gauge how you're justifying what we're seeing and whether or not you're going to hide what's going on or try to justify what's going on or try to buy into the bullshit that's coming out of the mouth of these people that are quite obviously wrong to a guy like me that actually knows immigration law, that knows these cases and has looked into these facts and is familiar with what they're trying to say. I'm on a roll, but look, there's never going to be a time where I'm not going to at least listen to you, which I think, and you know what, to be fair, you and I have disagreed before. I told you we're still going to be friends after this.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah, what I didn't want to do was like have other people on and have it be like 4-on-1 against Brad. I'd rather it just be like, you know, you and me, 1-on-1. Say what you got to say. By the way, my mom, who's a big fan of yours, is in the chat, I think. She voted for Trump. She called me a small-minded retard for voting for Trump. She did. She said that you're just small-minded, and I forgot what she said.
Well, you got Miguel in here too, and your mom. So,
oh, I haven't seen her comments yet because I've been on my roll. Miguel says, "I'm so glad I turned in today. It's nice seeing Omar fired up." Yeah, I've been pissed off for. I miss, at least when Biden was senile and old. At least I knew that things were relatively, not like this. When we have due process violations and people getting rounded up like it's this Gestapo, you got to draw a line somewhere. Anyway, I'll give you a chance to say what you got to say.
Well, the only thing that I really wanted to say off the beginning was the fact that there's nothing that I'm going to say that's going to change the minds of people who have already made their minds up, or at least I largely don't think there will be anything. And the other thing is I'm not a lawyer, 1. 2, I don't have any special knowledge of any of the internal dealings. The only access that I have is to public documents and my rudimentary constitutional knowledge from things that I've publicly read. So from that piece, I can only take statements at face value. And
which statements, though?
So I know you don't like Steve Miller, and I wouldn't say that I'm a fan of his, but it has been reported that there was a final order for removal.
There was not.
I can't find it.
I know you can't, and you're never going to find it because it doesn't exist. Here's what happened. You sent me something that actually told you exactly what happened. He filed an asylum claim.
Right.
He filed asylum claim. Right. He files this asylum claim. It was the only basis he had to stay here legally. He says I don't know. It's interesting. I find that when I was practicing immigration law way back in Obama years, lots of times people from El Salvador and Guatemala would come here for similar reasons. They're in a war-torn country, gang-riddled country. Interestingly enough, they made asylum running from gangs, from Mexican cartels, not a thing, but it was a thing in El Salvador and Guatemala. And oftentimes you'd see these children that would end up here, you know, with aunts, uncles, or whatever. Maybe they're just fleeing. This kid got here when he was 14 years old. He's there. He doesn't know how to avail himself of the court. So he's here from 2010 to 2019. In 2019, he's picked up by ICE. They picked him up at a Home Depot when he was looking for work. He was never convicted of any crimes, none. He was never found to be a member of MS-13 because if he was, he would have been deported. And then may I remind you that Barack Obama and Joe Biden, in their respective terms, 2012 to 2016, 2020 to 2024, both of those presidents deported far more people than Donald Trump did from 16 to 20. And who they actually deported were actual criminals, like they actually committed crimes. And you commit crimes, you disavail yourself of the protections of the United States. So this young man, he files an asylum claim because that's the only protection that he could have had. And he tells this story, but there's this 1-year bar on asylum claims.
Mm-hmm.
Try to apply for asylum outside of 1 year, and that would have expired for him back in 2011. It's almost automatically denied. So they never heard it on its merits. He couldn't get over the 1-year bar issue, but what they did for him was tell him that we are going to give you this withholding order. The government promises that we will not deport you. We will issue you a work permit.
Well, hold on. So the order of withholding is not a non-deportation order. It's saying that you could be deported, but not to a specific country for the reasons listed.
That's a statutory withholding order. His was a little bit different. So what you're getting at is there is statutory withholding orders where it's automatic, where you're still getting deported, but we're not going to send you to your place of origin because you're afraid of going there, right? He had something different. In the judge's discretion, they issued him a withholding order and allowed him to remain here in the States, issued him a work permit where he was legally here. He was here legally from 2019 until he was kidnapped to El Salvador. Let's call it that. So he was never deported. Let's not mistake terms. There was never a final order of removal, or otherwise he'd be gone, because there was not a basis to remove him. If he got a DUI, if he had some kind of a high-level misdemeanor, a violent crime, a felony, he would be gone, but for some very rare exceptions. So he was here legally. He was doing what he was supposed to do. He was working and living the life. This is the only country he's ever known as an adult. Imagine you at 15 years old being shipped off to, I don't know, freaking France or something. You don't know French. I mean, I don't know if you don't know French. I don't know French, but some country where I don't know the language and I don't have any family and I'm just there because I'm running scared because I'm afraid of gangs in the United States or whatever. I don't know. But that's basically what this young man did. He stayed out of trouble. And so America said, you can be here, just stay out of trouble and you're fine. And then he meets some young lady. They have a child together. They're married. He now has a viable path towards citizenship, which is one of the hallmarks, by the way, of why you would issue somebody a withholding order. Do you have a path to citizenship? Well, I'm engaged to this young lady. I'm about to get married, whatever. Okay. And so they take your address. They follow up. They check in with you. You got to check into like an ICE facility every now and again. Anyway. And so you are kept, they keep tabs on you. And so what happened with him is, after us making all of these promises to him, they said, no, you've been found by 2 different courts to be a gang member of MS-13, which had never happened. And you won't find any evidence that that was ever a finding by an actual court. You won't find an actual deportation order because it doesn't exist, and it's never existed. What Stephen Miller just did, that Donald Trump just co-signed on, was completely lie to your face about the nature of what was going on and what happened. And when the Supreme Court said, go back and get this young man and give him his due process, they said, no, make me. And that's where we are. That's where we're at. So under that context, Brad, I would like you to defend or explain. And Brad, it is okay to have voted for Donald Trump and view something like this as, yeah, I'm not down for that. It's okay to acknowledge that your president could do some shitty things that are worthy of impeachment and getting locked up himself. It's okay to acknowledge that your president is falling short of your expectations, that he's taking this country in directions that you had no idea that it was going to go, because we're humans and we make mistakes. And look, I voted for Biden. I voted for Kamala. I voted for Hillary. I voted for Obama twice. I voted for Bush in 2004. In 2000, I think I voted for, Al Gore.
Well, that I can't defend, so I'm sorry.
Well, I was also like 20, so I didn't know anything about anything. I couldn't tell you exactly why I voted for Gore, but I did, but I voted for Bush in 2004. And look, I'm just saying, you have to be willing to be flexible with your political opinions. As long as we stay flexible with each other. Look, you could disagree with me about political party. I'm not even telling you to acknowledge. This isn't even an argument. Yeah, this is not even an argument about immigration policy. It's not. Because you could tell me that asylum is bullshit. You could tell me that certain people shouldn't be allowed to come in here legally or illegally. That's a completely different argument than what we're having. What we're talking about right now is that this president has decided that this young man, who, by the way, all share common traits, they don't have pale white skin.
I wouldn't go that far.
I would, and I'm not going to allow anybody to make me believe otherwise, because he's not sending. Look, he's not deporting people to Iceland.
Well,
he's not deporting people to France.
Icelanders are clamoring to get into the United States because Iceland is supposedly one of the happiest countries in the world.
Not anymore. Right now, Icelanders are laughing at us and offended at the prospect.
No, the idea is if Icelander, your statement was Iceland, he's not trying to deport Icelanders. And
give me one case where he is.
But that's proving a negative. That's not.
And I'm not trying to fall into logical fallacies. All I'm saying is, listen, Brad, I love you, man. But Stephen Miller, you have to acknowledge what that fucking guy is. But I'm not calling Donald. Now, listen, hold on. Stephen Miller is a Nazi. You don't have to go that far. I'm going to go that far. If they're willing to call this guy a gang member, I'm going to call them a Nazi. Because I call it like I see it. But I have actual evidence of things that they're willing to do to back it up. And I have historical precedent where they are following a very specific game plan. And whether or not you like it or not, they literally banned the book. I forgot which library it was, but they literally banned a Maya Angelou book because it was, I don't know, DEI. It was not the right history that they wanted people to learn about, while keeping on the shelves Mein Kampf. Fact check me on that shit. I am not bullshitting you.
I'm not.
You know what? Ask
stuff like that, man.
I know, man. Forgive me for going too far. But this is where I'm at. Where before, and look, you and I have had very honest conversations. I told you that there was a time where I was considering Trump because I didn't like Kamala, and I was willing to listen to his policies, and I was willing to not fall into this trap of, oh, he's a Nazi, he's white nationalist, this and that. It's like, okay, look, I'm willing to listen. But I'm not going to, look, it's strike three, man. It is strike three for this guy. I'm no longer listening to him. I'm no longer I've made up my mind with him. I've had 12 years of listening to this rhetoric. I have 12 years of evidence of how he's conducted himself in office, how he conducts himself with reporters, about his willingness to suppress speech that runs counter to him, that he doesn't like, to chastise reporters for simply asking a question that more than half the country is legitimately asking. Because wait a minute, what do you mean he doesn't get due process? Some people don't even know what that means. But they're banking on the fact that this guy, Stephen Miller, could scream it to the rooftops loud enough. And then people that don't ask these critical questions will just go along and believe it. It's a battle for America, Brad. I know that you are an American. I know that you are a veteran. I know that you've served this country. You have fought for these ideals that I'm talking about. And I'm telling you, from what I can see, they are under attack in the White House. I'm not going to go overstep. I'm not going to say that, racist, whatever, I'm telling you, but I'll say that. I'm not going to try to convince you of that. I think that the president is racist. I think that Stephen Miller, the fact that he's allowed to be the mouthpiece of the White House, is telling. And Stephen Miller has made no bones about the fact of who and what he is. He's never denied being a white nationalist. He's never denied having Nazi ideologies, ever. And the fact that he's so willingly and openly and brazenly lying to the American people and the president doesn't do shit about it, yeah, I'm done with this guy. Fuck this guy. And so I'm not going to sit by and just wait for 4 years to be up. I don't care if it costs me subscribers. I don't care if, people decide. I remember one guy straight up said that I was a traitor because I didn't vote for Trump. I was like, fuck you then. The fuck off, man. Look, we don't have to agree on anything. The thing is, if I'm your friend, you're not my friend conditionally. You could believe and think and do whatever you want. I'm still going to, like Brad, you and I are going to be friends after this. I'm quite certain of that. But I have a fundamental disagreement with some of your ideologies, and I'm not even sure what they all really are. I'm not even sure if you've all processed them yet. Anyway, I feel like I'm over talking you. I don't mean to do that. I should give you a chance to respond.
Man. I'm here as the guest, so
yeah. But I invited you to because I wanted you to have an opportunity to speak.
No, it's good. So the biggest thing that because I spent a good 3 hours going through the timeline of this.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing for me is that he was picked up in March. He got a bond hearing in October, and then he got an appeal in December. And in October, the decision and order by the immigration judge laid out a bunch of different things. And this was the application for asylum, the application for an withholding order, and then the CAT, which is what does it stand for? Conventions Against Torture. Basically, he believes that if he went back to El Salvador, he'd be subject to torture, and therefore he shouldn't be.
When you apply for asylum, you apply for all of those, by the way, and at the same time, it's pretty standard.
Yeah. So they listed off all of the information in the order, and they gave background. His mother was very popular in her town because she made pupusas and sold them to everyone. I've had pupusas in DC from an El Salvadorian mother, and they were fantastic.
Is this from the what do you call it? That link you sent me earlier?
It was a link from within there. I can give you the order.
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah.
So they gave all of this background information, and they said,
right,
based on all of the information that was provided, and there's references to other addendums that I was unable to find, but they basically said the asylum order denied, the withholding order was allowed, and there's a couple of reasons for that. They said the extortion attempts by this gang called 18 Barrio, 18th Street,
right,
was enough fear that he should not be forced to go back to El Salvador.
I'm reading exactly from where you're pulling that from. It says, at some point, a gang called Barrio 18 took notice of the business success, began extorting the respondent's mother, which is, by the way, that's a pretty common thing over there. Just having worked on dozens of these kinds of cases. The gang threatened to harm the respondent, his older brother, Caesar, and the family in general if their demands were not met. Alternatively, they told Cecilia that if she couldn't pay the extortion money, she could turn Caesar over to them to become part of their gang. Family paid when they could and hid Caesar from the gang, ultimately sending him to the United States. After Caesar's departure, Barrio 18 started trying to recruit Abrego Garcia and told Cecilia that she would not have to pay any more rent if she let him join the gang. The immigration judge continued. The gang then threatened to kill him. When respondent was around 12, the gang came to home again, telling Cecilia they would take him because she wasn't paying money from the family's pupusa business. The respondent's father prevented the gang from taking the respondent that day by paying the gang off the money they wanted. Eventually, the family moves to another neighborhood 10 miles away by car, but Barrio 18 allegedly went there as well, twice threatening to rape and kill respondent's two sisters and threatening the respondent. None of those threats were apparently acted on because he's still alive, but Abrego Garcia's parents nonetheless kept him inside as much as possible. And at some point, the family closed the pupusa business and moved away to a different place that was a 15-minute drive away, but they continue to keep Abrego Garcia indoors most of the time because of threats to his life before sending him to the United States 4 months later. That's his background. Anyway, continue, Brad.
And then the family moves to Guatemala. And they said there is no reason why he couldn't be sent to Guatemala. It's in the conclusion of that document.
If there is a minute, or it may well show that the immigration judge withheld removal to Guatemala. But even if it doesn't, DHS could be forgiven. After reading the immigration judge's merits decision, granting statutory withholding for concluding the immigration judge withheld removal only to Guatemala, not to any other country, the government has been castigated for admitting it removed Abrego Garcia due to administrative error, but it certainly wasn't the only error that occurred during the tortuous history of this case. So even if you want to argue, and this is the thing, Brad, even if you want to argue that, well, we should have just shipped him off to Guatemala then. The point is to not give this guy at the very least due process to make his arguments, because if he goes there, he's going to state that he had statutory withholding, that he's married to a U.S. citizen, that he has a path to citizenship, and they're going to also argue that he shouldn't be removed because he's the father to a U.S. citizen child that has special needs, and they're going to give him an opportunity to apply for U.S. citizenship in the United States while remaining in the United States. There is not a legal path. There is no scenario where this guy was not going to eventually become a U.S. citizen under the current laws of immigration as it stands right now in 2025 that Donald Trump has not yet changed. None. But to get there, you have to have due process. And to ship him off to El Salvador without due process is the evil here. I'm not going to disagree, or I'm not going to argue with you about immigration policies. Look, you voted for that. I have views on it. Other people have views on it. This isn't about immigration policy. It's about shipping a kid off to El Salvador without due process, as if we're fucking North Korea. That's what we're arguing about right now. That's what this issue is about. It's not about all of this other stuff. You could follow these red herrings till you're blue in the face, and we have. And we've been litigating these issues for hundreds of years. I promise you, if I was representing this guy as his immigration attorney, there's no scenario where this kid gets deported to Guatemala because of his ties to the U.S., because he's married to a U.S. citizen, because he has a U.S. citizen child that would be negatively impacted by his removal from the country. And I know how to make those arguments. I have successfully made those arguments. I've had removal orders turned on their face because I properly argued contacts in the United States and how it would affect U.S. citizens. And really cases just like this kid's, where this is the only country that he's ever known as an adult. My voice is starting to go. But what do you think about that?
I think there's...
Well, let me just ask you this, because I know that you want your instinct is you want to argue the merits of his immigration case. And my retort to that is I can't argue the merits of his immigration case because he doesn't get due process. So it's not really the issue then, is it? So what I would like you to address is the due process aspect of this. Your president just kicked this kid out to El Salvador without so much as a hearing, has been told by the United States Supreme Court, of whom there are 5 conservative judges.
6.
6, Jesus. It is 6, isn't it? 6 conservative judges.
But I actually, I should say 5 because Roberts isn't really conservative and Amy Coney Barrett is more on the fence than one side or the other.
Well, honestly, that's good to hear. I could appreciate people being on the fence. But address the due process aspect of it. How does that make you feel as an American, knowing that you've served this country specifically so Americans for this country that has promised due process to all of these people is not being followed, and that Trump is changing the rules? He is no longer operating as a president. He's operating as an oligarch. He's operating as a dictator. He's operating as King Donald Trump. All the things that you told me he wasn't going to do. I'm not even talking about tariffs, man. I'm not talking about all of the other stuff. We could get in all that stuff as well. I'm talking specifically about this.
I understand you want to talk about the due process thing. And my retort to that would be, if Border Patrol finds someone attempting to cross the border, how much due process do they get before they're turned back? They get told, no, you leave.
That's completely different, though.
No.
Yes, it is.
Because
Nope. Nope. And they do get due process. So they're either turned involuntarily, they're either caught and turned away. And if they argue asylum, whatever, or some kind of claim that they have, they're caught at the border and they're kept in a detention center, and they're given an opportunity for due process. But they expedite those removal orders. And if they're caught, it might take a week or two, but they have the opportunity to consult with an attorney. They have the opportunity to argue a case. They have an opportunity to show that they have some viable basis for being here, or at least a path to viably being here. And then they're told yes or no by a judge. They absolutely get due process. And the ones that don't leave voluntarily, or they're caught to have prior removal orders that have already been litigated because they had due process before. There's never been a case, there's never been a time where even illegal immigrants were not at least afforded a modicum of due process. So I can't let you make that argument, Brad.
And the idea that this guy went before an immigration judge, had an appeal, and had representation enough that could have argued that the statements within these judges' orders about possible affiliations with MS-13 could have been appealed.
Show me where he was found to be a member of MS-13. It's not enough to say that he was found to be alleged to be a gang member. They never made an official finding on the merits that he was a gang member. Matter of fact, they found the opposite, and that's the only reason why he was granted withholding.
You
can look. You keep looking, Brad. You had 3 hours before. You're not going to find it, sir.
I'm trying to scroll the damn document.
All right. Look. You know what? Why don't we ask Grok?
It says he denied being a gang member and objected to the admissibility of the Form I-213 and the PG County, Prince George's County Police Department gang field interview sheet because he lacked an opportunity to cross-examine the detective who determined that he's a gang member. Now, they said that they had a confidential informant within MS-13 that positively identified him and has been credible in previous cases.
You're incorrect. That's not what they said. He was said to have had contacts with MS-13 in New York, in a state where he was found to have never lived, and frankly have never been in his 29 years of life.
I'm not saying that he did, but the informant said that he was. The
informant was fucking wrong. And if the informant was telling the truth, this kid would have been deported. It would not have been a withholding order. It would have been kick his ass out to Guatemala. You understand? It was not, there was never a question about whether or not he was actually a gang member. They tried that argument with him and it didn't work out because the informant was full of shit. That is what happened in court. So
I'm not seeing that in the record. I'm seeing the records
where it says that he was found to be a gang member. Not alleged, found. Because here's the thing, Brad. If they made a finding like that, he would have been deported back in 2019. Because one thing that Stephen Miller said is right. MS-13 gang members, when they're found to be gang members and confirmed to be gang members, do not have these protections. You know why? You know who put that in place? I don't even want to say it was Obama, but he had stuff like that in place. That's been in place forever. If you're found to be a member of an organization that has been labeled as a terrorist organization, such as MS-13, then you don't get these remedies if you're up for removal in these immigration cases. So for you to tell me that he was found to have been a gang member, if that's true, he would have been deported back in 2019. Not given a work permit, not giving a withholding order. And he had to report to ICE every year annually to, keep tabs on him. They had every opportunity to remove him if that was true, but it wasn't. And let me tell you something. These fucking immigration attorneys that work for ICE, they don't fuck around with that stuff. They keep raps on you. They got a rap sheet. They will hand it to you. If you're an immigration attorney, they will show you all of the things that he's done in his history of being a part of the United States, not just in the state where he's in, but anywhere he's ever been. They got record of his entries. They'll have records of when he was caught at the border and turned away. They will have records of his relatives and his country of origin. They had everything on this kid, and they couldn't find a basis to remove him. They showed him mercy. They said, all right, withholding. And they gave him a work permit. And they said, just stay out of trouble. We'll leave you alone. But we broke our promise to him. That's what this is about.
So do you want me to bring up this bond memorandum? Or?
I'll read it. So the bond hearing on March 31st, DOJ responded to an emergency motion for temporary restraining order that had been filed by the plaintiffs in this case.
No, I got the document up.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I want
Okay.
to read.
Okay. Oh, you got it. I'm sorry. Go for it.
So it talks about the respondent requested a bond redetermination hearing April 24th. At his bond hearing through counsel, he requested a $5,000 bond. He argued that he is not a flight risk. He asserted that he has lived in the United States for 8 years. He has 2 brothers who are legal permanent residents. His fiance, United States citizen, and he's helping to raise her 2 kids. His fiance is also 5 months pregnant with his child. Pregnancy is high risk. Is stated that he failed to appear on hearings on some traffic violations because he was not aware of those hearings, and he intends to hire an attorney and resolve those.
Stop right there. So that scroll up. He did have these traps. So he stated that he failed to appear for hearings on some traffic violations because he wasn't aware of those hearings. That's misdemeanor violations. But there is a chart where they gauge basically the merits of these crimes, traffic violations, stuff like that. Anyway, I'm sure that's not your point. I'll let you continue.
In addition, the respondents say that he intends to apply for relief in the form of asylum and adjustment of status based on his relationship to his fiance, and he intends to marry, which he filed.
So, so what that is, I know that the asylum, I know that his asylum application was denied.
Yep.
But as you notice, he had to state his path to citizenship.
Right.
That's why he mentions his fiance, whom he intends to marry, and all that kind of stuff. All right. So I'm with you. So far, go for it.
Respondent also argues that he's not a danger to the community and he has no criminal convictions. Good.
Okay.
He denies being a gang member and objected to the feasibility of the Form I-213 in the PG County's gang field interview sheet because he lacked the opportunity to cross-examine the detective who determined he is a gang member.
Okay.
DHS opposed his request for bond. DHS asserted that the respondent is a verified gang member. Now, this document was filed in 2019 after he was picked up by ICE.
Just because they assert it doesn't mean there's been a finding. You understand? So they had this informant that said he's a gang member. We've talked about this. Just because they assert that, of course they asserted it. They never made a finding that it was true, is my point.
But I'm saying this is the judge going over the parties arguing their points.
Sure. This is a bond hearing. This is what they do.
The respondent was arrested in the company of other ranking gang members and was confirmed to be a ranking member by a proven and reliable source.
That's what they asserted.
DHS argued that the Form 213 is a legally reliable document in immigration court.
This is an evidence argument. So where's the finding then?
After
I know that they had that argument.
Information by parties, the court concluded that no bond was appropriate for the matter. The court first reasoned that respondent failed to meet the burden of demonstrating that his release from custody would not pose a danger to others, as the evidence shown that he is a verified member of MS-13. That is the finding.
That's not a finding. That's not a finding that led to his removal. That is a bond hearing. It's very specific. They're not arguing the merits of any petition. He applies for bond. and release. And so when you argue for bond, you get bonded out, and then it gets to lengthen your proceedings. So if they deny bond and they make findings at this bond hearing, that's not an official finding that he's a gang member. It's suggesting that, well, they presented evidence he's a gang member, so let them figure it out. So then they deny him bond and they advance him to the next court who did not make that finding. And what that next court does is what matters. They're trying to make a split-second decision about whether or not to give him bond or not. And since they had a document, they're purported to say that this guy is a gang member, I guess. So denial of bond. It meant that he had to stay in custody while litigating his asylum claim, which led to him getting a withholding order. Do you understand the distinction?
I believe so.
It's like, for example, if you file for a restraining order,
Right.
let's just say that your wife files for a restraining order against you. Let's just say she says all kinds of crazy stuff against you, like, oh, he beat me with like a whatever, with a spaghetti strings, and like
with this drill bit that I've got.
You beat her with a drill bit. She just says that, right? A judge makes a split-second decision. You know what? I'm going to grant a restraining order, and we're going to have a hearing on this in 21 days. It's not an official finding of domestic violence. It's saying, well, I'll take your word for it, but I'm not going to give a bond, or I'm not going to deny a temporary restraining order. All they did was keep him in custody while they got to the bottom of it. That's not the same as finding him a gang member. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm then confused as to how this language gets into this, because this isn't just a guy is appearing for bond in for 5 minutes in front of the judge after.
Could you scroll up again?
Mm-hmm.
What's the title of this document? It's the finding from the bond hearing, right?
It says
bond memorandum. Yes. So scroll back down. This language is just saying, look, we're denying him bond because as far as we can tell, this is the case. So this language here where they state that, they got something that says that he appears to be a gang member. So I guess we're just going to assume that that's true. We're not going to issue him a bond. We're going to keep him in ICE custody while we litigate this. But you know what he got back in 2019? Fucking due process. You know what he's not getting in 2025? What's the magic word of the day? Due process. Due process. In other words, Brad, I'm not arguing. I'm not making any immigration case on behalf of this kid. I am stating that when he was given due process before, he was found not to be a danger to the country. He was found not to be a danger to anybody. He was found not to be a MS-13 gang member, and they let him go. He was not removed from the country. They gave him a fucking work permit. They said, stay here, get a job, live your life. Good luck to you and your fiance. That's what they said. And that was after he got due process. If they were to bring him back and give him due process today, I'd imagine that it would be a similar result. And that's the evil that we're talking about. Do not get distracted by language from this case that you don't understand. This is a process. This is immigration procedure. The bond hearing is not a finding of merits. They specifically have hearings that are called merits hearings. Merits hearings in immigration language is literally the trial for your petition. They denied his asylum petition, not because it lacked merit, but because he couldn't defeat the 1-year bar. But then they said, okay, well, he's not a gang member. He doesn't have a criminal record. He's got a path to citizenship. Let's give him a withholding order.
And he was given the opportunity to appeal in addition to that.
Irrelevant, because it didn't matter. I don't know if he appealed or not. All I know is the end result is they gave him a withholding order. They did not remove him from the country. If they wanted to remove him to Guatemala or France or somewhere else, they would. They would have, but they didn't.
But timing, because remember, this was.
But hold on, John. Brad, I got to stop you for time's sake. What are you arguing right now? Are we arguing the merits of this kid's case, or are we arguing his rights to due process? Because I'm only interested in that, in the latter.
Because you're saying that he was given the work permit by DHS in 2019. and then he wasn't deported past that. But when you look at what happened in 2020, election change, leadership change, policy change, all of that happens in 2020. It goes into effect 2021. And then nothing happens for the next 4 years because they're like, yeah, we believe this guy is still worthy of staying here. And then now you get to this new administration, and then he hasn't fought this conception of being an MS-13 gang member. And then because MS-13 is designated as a foreign terrorist organization, the withholding order becomes invalid.
Brad, I'm just going to say this. I don't care. Let's just say that you're right. I don't care. Then give him a fucking hearing. Bring him back. Bring him before an immigration judge and make your case. Don't just ship him off without giving him his rights to due process. Let's just say, oh, he should have been deported back in 2019. Great. Then bring him back. And like the Supreme Court said, do whatever you were going to do whatever you would have done. But he is afforded, he has the right. He has the American right to due process. If you want to argue that the immigration courts got it wrong in 2019, then give him due process. They're not even giving him that chance. You are not an immigration attorney.
No,
I'm not even an immigration attorney. I haven't practiced immigration law in like 10 years. But I'll tell you what, whether your arguments are right or wrong, whether my arguments are right or wrong, the kid fucking deserves due process is the point. And this is the most famous case. It's not the only case. It turns out that there was only 5 confirmed cases that anybody they sent to El Salvador are actually criminals that have been convicted of crimes. It's not just this kid. It's everybody that they sent over there without due process. Everybody. Give them their case, let them stand in front of a judge, make their arguments. They're either here legally or they're not. They either have a path towards citizenship or not. They're either eligible for relief or they're not. But give them their fucking due process. And if you're not willing to do that, then we're not America anymore. We're something else. We're North Korea. We're El Salvador. We're Russia. All of these other dictators that Trump has a hard on for. But we're not America. That's my point. This is not a case about whether or not his immigration case has merit. This is a fight for the soul of America. And that's all it is. I'm not saying that this kid should be automatically just given a mansion and made to live happily ever after with his wife and his child for, without anything, whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm saying give him the thing that he was promised. And if you're not going to give it to him, then somebody may not give it to you. If Trump is coming after American-born citizens, that includes you in that category, sir. And let's just say that you happen to get railroaded in court, found guilty of a felony. What could it be? How about tax evasion? Don't pay your taxes? Enjoy your time in Guatemala. You don't want to pay your taxes? Enjoy your time in El Salvador. Bitch, without due process.
But if I got railroaded, then I was given process, regardless of whether I believe it was right or not.
Okay, maybe, but you'd be a convicted felon. And when they catch you, I don't know what time. Look, it's not illegal. It's not legal to just deport American citizens. It's not.
Right. And I would absolutely agree that there should be no, the only case that an American citizen should end up at this detention facility in El Salvador is if they've been convicted of a violent felony and they say, well, we can put them in an American prison where we're paying $300 a month, whatever the case may be, to this private system, or
that's already the case right now.
Whatever the case is, we're paying $10,000 for a private prison system here, but we can send them to Guatemala or El Salvador and pay $300 a month
No,
to-
we
to
gave
have-
El Salvador $6 million to keep those fucking people to keep these aggrieved people in prison.
Whatever the case may be, if it's just a simple financial decision, they're still under the jurisdiction of America, but they're at a prison in El Salvador.
Bruce,
Then
I'm going to send you, I don't mean to call you Bruce, Brad, I'm going to send you to an El Salvadorian prison while we figure out your tax situation.
no.
Tax is not committed tax evasion, by the way. I'm just using this as an example.
Convicted.
This is hyperbole.
I'm talking convicted, not
Okay.
just sitting in a holding cell
You're
waiting for my
assuming.
trial.
You are assuming that you're going to get due process. Fuck your due process. You're just going to sit in El Salvador until we figure this shit out. And when we put you on a plane after we've jumped to conclusions and labeled you as a criminal, and you're screaming to the high heavens that I'm not guilty, I didn't do anything. Fuck you and your rights. Fuck you and your due process. Sit your ass over there. I can't kidnap somebody from El Salvador. I can't tell them what to do. And then El Salvador president was like, well, I'm not just going to send a criminal to America. And I'm certainly not going to let him loose to run around on my streets. So I guess he's just going to sit there. You haven't been convicted of anything, and neither has this kid. That's the problem, Brad. That is the issue. It's not all of the other stuff that you're trying to argue. It's the fundamental right to due process. And this fucking president and Nazi-ass Stephen Miller is running a con on the country, on the world, and is expecting you and the followers to fall in line. Because what are you going to do about it, bitch? Impeach me then. I got the House and the Senate. Your move.
I mean, I don't know what you want me to say. I can only argue with the facts that I'm given.
Okay.
Like I said.
But time out, Brad. The facts that you're given, look, I respect you attempting to make an argument on the immigration case. And I appreciate that. But the problem is, Brad, it's premature. It's premature, Brad. We can't make these arguments because the kid is sitting in an El Salvadorian prison. Does that make sense? Like due process. Without due process, what do we have? You want to make all these legal arguments. Your instinct is to make these legal arguments. You can't get there. I want you to address the due process issues. I'm not going to let you deviate from that. This is about right to due process. If you can't, look, whatever you want to say, whatever you want the policies to be, whatever your immigration policy desire is, I don't care. That's great. I'm not going to argue with you on that.
Yeah.
But I want you to respond to all of these people being shipped off to prison without due process. What do you think about that? And I know you've heard the quotes. I know you've seen the video with Donald Trump talking with the president, talking about he's going after American citizens. I know you saw that.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to speak to that. What have you to say to that?
The line that's also included in that context, it says, if they're criminals and if they hit people with baseball bats over the head that happen to be 90 years old, or if they rape an 87-year-old woman in Coney Island, Brooklyn, yeah, that includes them. So that implies somebody would have been charged and convicted for a violent act. And then if they get sent over to this prison, then so be it. They've gotten their due process.
I'll grant you that. If somebody rapes an 87-year-old woman or hits them over the head with a baseball bat, let's send them there on a rocket, firing squad style, on one of these Elon Musk rockets, and just like, let's just hope, strap them to the back. Hey, if you make it, you make it. I'm all for that. But what did this kid do? He didn't rape an 87-year-old woman. He didn't beat anybody over the head with a baseball bat. And if you were to ask him, as he's been telling the court since 2019, he's not a gang member and he hasn't been convicted of any crimes. I know you want, no, hold on. I know you want to believe that Trump is only going after criminals, but he's fucking not. This kid is not a criminal. Of the people that were rounded up, pull up the numbers. Only 5 of them have been convicted of felonies that are currently sitting in this El Salvadorian prison right now. I agree with you. The criminals should be gone. You know who else agreed with that? Biden. You know who else agreed with that? Obama. And you want to know what else? They were more successful at deporting criminals than Trump was, because Trump's just not very good at it. They streamlined a process to take in people that were not criminals and to kick out the people that were, but they gave them due process. And you know what?
But we're getting more into policy, and you didn't want to get into policy.
But you're right. Fair. All I'm saying is the due process thing. Look, I know you want to say, well, if they're convicted criminals, fine. But this guy's not going to give them the opportunity to be criminals because he's sending them on a plane on mere suspicion.
But the problem is you have a record with.
What is his record? What is his record?
The judicial record of the immigration judge and the bond hearing.
Stop. Nope.
With
stop.
the evidence.
Stop. Okay, if you want to argue the evidence, fine. Put them in a hearing and then deport them. And you know what? They could have done that. They could have just given him a hearing. They could have taken him in, expedited his hearing, and found him unable to be admitted into the United States and removed him. And nobody would have said shit about it. You know why? Because due process. But when you don't give him due process, that's a dangerous precedent. Then you know what we become? Nazi fucking Germany. And I'm not even speaking hyperbole when I say that. I know that you're a student of history.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you know or are aware of how Adolf Hitler came off as like this funny little guy that had these weird, stupid ideas, and he would say these outlandish things, and he just got a following. And then he became into power. And then he was like, oh, let's give him a chance. He'd be better than the status quo, whatever. And then he does. And then he tries to eradicate the entire Jewish race and take over the world. That was his mistake. Trump is not making those mistakes, but he's following the same playbook.
But you're taking the argument and going to the historical context to try and link to current events that's
sure,
outside
hyperbole.
the scope.
I'm not trying to convince you that. Yeah, I don't want to convince. I'm not trying to convince you that. That's my personal belief. I believe that this guy is following the same playbook as Hitler. I don't care if you who wants to agree with me or that. I recognize it myself. I'm not going to try to convince you that. All I'm saying is, sticking to the topic, when a president starts removing folks and refusing to follow the Supreme Court orders, what are we doing? What did you fight for, Brad? Like, you were a member of the military services. Mm-hmm. You took oaths to protect this country.
Right.
And you were a patriot. You served your country. And you certainly have ideals, I got to imagine. When a president decides to run counter to the principles that you fought for, does that offend you at all? Or are you going to follow him blindly?
I can list things that presidents have done in my lifetime that I am not okay with. And
okay. I just want to hear you say you're not okay with this. That's what I'm looking. I don't want to hear you defend him. I want to hear you say, as an American, oh shit.
Uh-oh.
What happened to my camera?
your battery died on your camera?
I'll fix it later. I just want to hear you say that you're not okay with what's going on.
The problem that I'm running into is this idea that he has received multiple bits of due process, and even though I can't find a final order,
you'll never find it, Brad. It doesn't exist. Spoiler alert.
I find it hard to believe that they would say that there's a final order out there.
Good. I'm glad that you want to find it hard to believe. I want you to look for it. You know what? When you find it, if
it's released, I will send it to you.
Okay. I will come in, and you know what I'll say? You know what you should do, Brad? You should present that at his due process hearing and give the kid a fucking chance.
But if he was given a final order, there's no more chances after that.
But he wasn't. He was never given a final order removal.
Hypothetically, if he had the order and the order said you are to be removed from this country,
Hypothetically, fair. Hypothetically, fine. Give him a hearing and make that finding.
Well,
that's all. No buts. No buts. You don't know if he has a final order of removal.
Right.
Nobody has
and if
seen.
Stephen Miller is lying to the public, then that's terrible and he shouldn't be doing it. I am perfectly fine saying that. Do I think he's lying at this moment? No, I don't.
Okay. I appreciate you, Lee, saying that. I do. I want you to find. Well, it's even beside the issue. It really is. I just want this kid to have a hearing. We're deporting this kid with the assumption and basing it off of Stephen Miller's lies, who it's really Donald Trump's lies. Let's not make any mistake. He's the fucking president, right? Yeah. Stephen Miller is the mouthpiece. So these are Donald Trump's lies.
He's not
that I see no merit in.
He's the head of DHS policy and other things. He's not just.
If there's anybody that should not be the head of DHS policy, Stephen Miller is not the guy. He is not the fucking guy. He is a white Okay. What do you think about this? I know I've been really harsh on this guy. I'm not going to stop being harsh. I'm just curious about what you think he is.
I think he's trying to implement the idea that people should not be in this country when they're not given proper authorization to do so.
Obama said that too. Biden said that too. He goes a step farther than that, Brad. I think you should acknowledge it.
You can go back to politicians back in the 90s that are saying that illegal immigration is terrible for the American public. Chuck Schumer stood up on the congressional floor and said the same thing. It's still on video of old C-SPAN from like the 1994 of him saying these arguments that illegal immigration is bad for the American society.
Yeah, you're not going to find many presidents that disagree with that notion, though, is the point.
However, the actions of said presidents in your own argument saying that President Obama made a formal policy to try and get those who were non-criminals to get into this country. So if illegal immigration is bad for the country and yet the president is creating policies that are able to effectuate the thing that they're saying is bad for the country, then that in itself is bad.
By the way, Micah, thank you for becoming a new member. And by the way, my brother just donated $1 to the cause. I appreciate you, brother. By the way, Stephen Miller would deport my brother in a heartbeat. Sorry, Chris.
I don't know. He might try to date him, but that's a different story. But no, I'm seeing all of these chats, and I'm sorry that I'm coming off as a callous son of a bitch. But
I don't think that you're callous. Here's what I think. I think that you're too optimistic about your beliefs. I think that you're a young, idealistic man, and that you're very hopeful.
Young as 35 can be, but you know,
I mean,
my own mother told me that I'm too nice for my own good, and there's times where I give faith and credit to people when I really shouldn't. So
I would agree with that. But let me just could I just share with you some of I just looked up Grok. Mm-hmm. I asked him, give me evidence that Stephen Miller is a white supremacist. This is what they said. The Southern Poverty Law Center published a report based on over 900 emails that Miller sent to Breitbart editors between 2015 and 16. Key revelations include promotion of white nationalist literature. Miller frequently cited and linked to the white nationalist publication VDare and the race science website American Renaissance. He recommended The Camp of the Saints, which is a French racist novel widely celebrated in white nationalist circles, which portrays immigrants as invaders. He has an obsession with demographics and immigration. Emails show that Miller's preoccupation with immigration from non-white countries, often framing it as a threat to American culture or security. He circulated crime stories involving immigrants and Muslims, which is a pretty common tactic with white nationalist propaganda. He lobbied praise for the 1924 Immigration Act, favorably referencing it. That act, which specifically restricted immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe and effectively banned immigration from Asia. This law was explicitly designed to preserve America's Nordic character, was praised by white supremacists at the time, including Hitler. They talk about his public policy advocacy, Miller's fingerprints being all over Trump era policies, family separation at the border, Muslim travel ban, reduction of refugee admissions to historic laws, attempts to end birthright citizenship, opposition to DACA and TPS, which, by the way, DACA's like, hey, hold on, let me drink some water. Jesus.
If anything, Garcia would have been available under DACA. Yeah, because he came over at 12, but he wasn't even brought to the country. He was just shipped to the country.
Yeah. But there's what really, yes, to that, he would have been a DACA guy. But DACA was really more written by Obama for those people that came over to the United States when like 1 or 2 by their parents. They were born in Mexico or they're born somewhere else. And their first entry in the United States was at 2 years old, but they're not citizens. And they didn't have any other traditional viable path to citizenship. DACA attempted to try to rectify that by stating that if they did certain things, then they would be given a chance. It was the Dreamers Act. I know that you know it well. Well, Miller didn't like that shit. While Miller has not publicly identified as a white nationalist and has denied being one, he has a long-standing association with anti-immigration hardliners like David Horowitz and his defense groups with VDARE. He has, look, in short, I'm not going to read this whole thing. He has a rich history of rejecting American ideals and promoting white nationalistic tropes. He's been identified to me as a white nationalist guy really since I first learned about him in 2016. He is as cold-blooded of a racist, white nationalist, Nazi as you could possibly get. And he's running DHS. What a guy.
I mean, I'm not here to defend Stephen Miller.
But you said that you thought he's right. You don't think that he would lie about this kid.
I'm saying I'm taking him at face value.
I'm not ever again taking him at
right.
anything.
People can not take him at face value.
But Brad, look, it's not that I'm not taking him at face value. I know that he's lying because I looked into it. And I looked into it through some of the stuff that I even looked into it through some of the stuff that you sent me this afternoon.
Right.
And from that, I found out that he was I could have concluded from that he was bold-faced lying to the world.
But I'm saying, for whatever reason, immigration court proceedings, I can't find. And if there's a special way to find it, I will be more than happy to research it.
When you find it, if you find it, I will have you back on and I will eat crow. But I will still acknowledge that if you find it, then great, give the kid a hearing, give him his due process, because that's what America is about.
But if he was given the process and then given the final order, then the due process has been already given and they are now executing it 5 years later.
No, that's not how it works. That is not how it works. Every time that you're detained for anything and Chris says, hey, you're both technically, ironically, and satirically correct. Next point. I'm just going to say this. Every time you're detained, you're entitled to due process. You can't rely on due process from 2019 because the due process from 2019 will be confirmed in your new due process from 2025. This kid isn't getting it, and that's the point, Brad. That's all I'm arguing. Anyway, what's the next point?
So within the 3 days of when he was detained by ICE, he should have been seen a court to say, here's your final removal paperwork. Here's your court-appointed attorney, or you can provide one of your own, and then you can argue it. And then,
hey, Brad, I'm going to fix my camera real quick. I'm going to let you say what you're going to say. I'm going to listen through the headphones.
No, you're good. But
you seem like you're responding to the mic. I'm over here now.
That's functionally what you're arguing, is that within those 3 days, he should have been given some form of due process, whether it's in front of a magistrate and a immigration judge, or some form to say you're finally getting executed, your status has been revoked, and you are now being removed from the country under this final deportation order that was seen and argued in 2019. How do you respond? and then he can presumably provide some form of defense at that point.
Okay, so do you disagree with that then?
Sure, I would say that should have been offered to him.
Well, then what are we even doing? If you agree with me, then what are we doing?
But the question comes down to, he could have argued the facts of supposedly being an MS-13 person, and he didn't.
Brad, I love you, man. I love you, man. But we've been going for an hour and 40. I got to tell you this. Whatever it is that you want to argue doesn't fucking matter. Okay, ignore this kid. It's not just about this kid. Okay. What about all of the others that have been removed, that have viable cases to be here, but they also were not given due process? It's not just about this one kid. If you deny due process to one, even if he's got a losing case, then you could deny due process to everybody. And if all the people that they shipped over to that torture chamber in El Salvador, only 5 of them were confirmed to be criminals. But Donald Trump and Stephen Miller would lead you to believe that they were all criminals, rapists, child molesters, murderers, cat eaters.
Cat eaters? That's a whole... he said? Because the cat eaters was back from the Ohio case.
I know what it was from. I'm just fucking around. Either way, he called them criminals. None of them got due process. None of them. So if you deny it to anybody, even if they got a losing case, then nobody, even if they have a winning case, gets to stay here, because that's the point of due process. If you get rid of due process, you are depleting a major facet of the soul of this country that so many people died to preserve. That you joined the military and defended this country and fought for people's rights to due process because it's in the Constitution. And if you can't acknowledge that, and I know that you've acknowledged it, but you want to keep on going, arguing the cases, I want you to acknowledge that to deprive these people of due process is un-American, at the very least. Will you at the very least acknowledge that?
Is his attempts with his attorney to try and get...
Ignore this kid. I'm talking about everybody else as well. Let's just say somebody out there, and there are plenty that have legitimate cases.
So somebody removed from the country that's part of a Tres Aragua, or whatever the case may be. They should have had some sort of due process to validate and determine that they are a part of Tres Aragua. They are here illegally, and they should no longer be here, so they're sent to El Salvador.
What about Lino Chavez?
I don't know. I wasn't given the name Leo.
He was a 19-year-old kid. He fled from Venezuela. He was residing with family in Dallas. He was 19. He had a valid work permit. He had a court date scheduled for July 2026. He was here legally, waiting for his pending asylum claim. Then he's picked up by ICE in March of 2025 and shipped to El Salvador. Deprived of his due process, he has a hearing scheduled for next year. Frengel Reyes, 24-year-old house painter in Tampa, had a wife and a young son, was complying with a routine ICE check-in. And then he's just detained. And then in his case, the government's paperwork is riddled with errors. They acknowledge the errors. ICE alleged that he may be an affiliate of a gang, but they listed someone else's alien registration number, and they misidentified his gender. They offer no actual evidence of gang ties and ship his ass out. No due process. Fuck that guy. Those are 2 examples. These people are also being affected by the no due process rule under Donald Trump. You can't make any immigration claims against these people. And my general rule is going to be, if you can make a claim, then give them their court hearings, give them due process. Don't leave them to rot in an El Salvadorian prison, which is what this administration is doing. What do you say to that? To those? There's lots of cases out there like that, Brad.
I have no idea because I wasn't given those. I was only given the one.
Those were all in the news. I didn't prep you for, I mean, I know we've been talking about
We're talking
the
about
other guy.
Garcia, but the problem is sure, if taking your recitation of the facts, yes, it's horrible.
Look it up. Should I pull up look, you want me to pull up the articles?
I mean, sure, the articles are going to be written in the most favorable light to the person who's deported.
Why would you assume that?
Because I would assume that the news is going to do that.
Because Trump told you that these are low-level reporters that they have
not
such low
because
ratings.
Trump told me anything.
Okay.
I'm saying that there is certainly a point in the media that they will want to try and jab and make a light of a story when there is favorable stories regarding
Brad,
Garcia and others.
I hear you, man. But listen, you got to wake up, sir. Brad, you were a good man. You need to stop listening to the rhetoric of this office and start thinking for yourself. And if you come to the conclusion that it is a general facet of America that everybody, criminal or non-criminal, should be given due process to ferret out the truth and the veracity of the government's claims against you, and you subscribe that everybody should be afforded due process, then you just have to acknowledge that what this administration is doing is bullshit. And it's okay to be a MAGA person and acknowledge that this is bullshit. It's okay. But if you can't acknowledge it, if you can't admit that this very basic constitutional right that you have, that denying it to one person, when Trump is literally saying he's coming after US citizens, there might be a time when you too, when you will not be afforded due process. And that is a threat that is worth going to war over. And that's why I am done making peace with MAGA folks that want to bury their head in the sand and pretend that this isn't happening, because it's happening, and it's not even been 100 days. Folks, I got to cut this short because I don't know how much my voice is going. I'm talking a little bit too loud. Brad, I appreciate you coming on and being a good sport, and I appreciate the discussion that you're willing to have. I'll say this about you, Brad. I believe that you're a good man. I do. And there's probably a lot of things that you know a lot more than I do about politics and things like that. But the politics that you grew up on and became infatuated with, and that formed the base of your political views, is fundamentally under attack in a way that I've never seen in my 44 years. And if you fail to acknowledge it, then you might just wake up a couple years from now, and this country that you signed up to defend with your life will be forever altered. And our place on the world stage will be forever denigrated to something less than. That's all. I really can't talk anymore. I'd love to stay and chat, man, but my voice sucks right now.
No, you're good, man, and I appreciate it. And like I said, I know I'm putting my neck out there to a lot of people, and I may not say the thing that everyone wants me to say, but my opinion is formed based on what I believe, in addition to what facts I am given. And arguably, from all sides, there are facts that are missing. And when we have a better picture of that, we will have a better understanding of where things need to go and where it should end up.
Because I appreciate you. I appreciate that.
I will say this.
Okay.
If there was a congressional bill to say that anyone who's under a foreign terrorist organization should be given due process for removal from the country, go for it. Yeah, I agree.
Adolf Hitler got due process.
Well, but that's the thing is due process is because that's what I was trying to say before. President Obama drone striked an American citizen in Yemen and said
No, do not deflect. No, I'm not doing that.
deflecting. I'm saying due process.
I know.
The function of due process was saying that a
But we're
chain
not
of
gonna
command to
I get it.
generals is due process to that person.
I'm not going to do the Trump thing where we're talking about one issue, then he deflects to some other bullshit issue, then everybody forgets what we're talking about. Fuck all of that. I just want you to agree that these people deserve due process. If you agree with that, then we're not disaligned on what we're arguing. You could argue the merits of their case all you want. I just want them to have a hearing because that's the American way. I can't talk anymore, Bruce.
Yeah. Go.
All right, folks. I love you all.
All right.
Brad, thank you so much for doing this, man. You're a
No
G
problem,
for coming in. Are you going to do Flad this weekend or no?
Yeah, I should be able to do Flad.
I will not bring up politics on that show, I promise.
Just make sure it's after 8 p.m. Eastern.
I'll do my best. All right. I love you, folks.
All right. See you guys.
Have a good night. Bye.